The Arsenal are back and all is right in the world. We've got a trip to West Ham this weekend to look forward to, and you're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou, and I'm joined today by the brilliant Michael Stavrou. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. The only person that's called me Michael in a long time other than my mum, so that was weird.
I did it on purpose because I think we've had this conversation before where you said the only other person to call me that is my mum, so I thought I'd embarrass you. Hopefully it worked.
Thanks,
anyway, good to have you back on the pod. Great for you to be with us as always. We're going to do something a little bit different today. Rather than kind of following the news lines on the pod, I thought we could tackle some of the questions and debates that I've come across when surfing the web in recent days. I've pulled together 5 questions that myself and Mike are going to work our way through. And I'll imagine that we'll probably agree on some of the answers, but hopefully for your sake and for the sake of entertainment and for the good of the debate, there'll be some answers that we probably disagree on as well. What I will say at the top of this is if you enjoy this format, let us know in the comments. And if it goes down well, I'm sure we'd be happy to do it again. Before we dive into it, though, I just want to point you in the direction of our Patreon offering. You can sign up for just £3 per month. That's less than the price of a coffee in those swanky cafes that seem to have popped up everywhere. With that, you'll have access to our match day reaction pods and access to all the other Patreon content that we put out there. I released an episode this morning discussing football commentary, kind of how you get into it, loads of the rejections that I had along the way as well, to becoming a sort of working, although not very good football commentator myself. And when me and Mike finish here, we're going to be recording another bit for the Patreon side of things where we'll be discussing what Mikel Arteta's best midfield looks like. And that'll be available to you guys very, very shortly as well. So lots to come over on the Patreon side of things. If you'd like to support the pod, help us to make more content, then head over there and we'd really appreciate your support. Okay, Mike, let's do it. New format, 5 questions. Let's begin. And the first one, I think, is a juicy one. I think this is the one that when I wrote these down, I was looking most forward to discussing. And it's with regards to the right back position at Arsenal. So the question is Jurrien Timber a better right back option than Ben White?
It is a tough question.
The long pause said it all.
It's a tough question, but I think it's a relevant one. And I think you can actually draw comparisons because they've kind of played similar-ish minutes this season, and just because of sort of Ben White's injury, he'd usually start, but Timber's actually deputised for him quite a lot. And obviously, there's slight nuances because Timber has played at left back as well, which is a slightly different role in this team. But just for the sake of this comparison, just looking at the numbers, Timber's started 10 and played 11, and Ben White has started 7. And played 9 overall. So pretty similar. And when you look into the numbers, it kind of shows up what you expect, that Timber is a bit better going forward, and Ben White is a bit better defensively and aerially. And I think that kind of goes in line with what you see on the pitch. Timber is obviously a much more busier player. I think he's better on the ball. He darts forward a lot more. He's obviously smaller, quicker, I would say. And then Ben White is obviously taller and, has played centre back for us before. I know Timber has played there in his career, but I think to me, strikes me as a bit more of a fullback in stature and profile. And without sort of going too much into it, and I'm sure we can discuss in a bit. I want to get your thoughts as well on it. But for me, I think it's nice overall to have the 2 different profiles as right back options, and I think it's really healthy to have that. And I know previous episodes we've spoken about sometimes having versatility is almost a detriment. In this case, I think it's a great thing because it just means that with Ben White out, we don't have to play a Cedric or gonna pull out a name here, Stefan Lichtsteiner.
Wow.
We've got. Yeah, I know that's a throwback, isn't it? But we've got an actual able deputy who's an experienced player who has played in top teams and played in big competitions. So having him is great, and I think he's a great player. And yeah, we can go into specifics, as I said, on who's better overall in my eyes.
I think it's a really, really interesting question, this one, because Ben White has been so good for so many seasons now that you almost feel like dirty suggesting that there could be a better option at right back than him. And I think a lot of people, myself included, when I first kind of thought about this question, go into kind of defensive mode over Ben White. And you go, nope, Ben White's been great. He's been outstanding. He's been a cracking signing. I'm not having you say anything that would suggest that Ben White is not the best option at right back for us anymore. I think the thing I'm finding quite difficult with Jurrien Timber in terms of reading him and understanding kind of where his ceiling is and how far he can go is that when he plays at left back, he looks completely different to when he plays at right back. And I understand that he's playing on his wrong side, right? And when you put a player on their wrong side, particularly along the back four, they're going to be a little bit more cautious and they're going to be a little bit more pragmatic in their approach. And I think that's certainly what we've seen from Jurrien Timber when he plays left back. Does he get forward? Yes, but not as much. Does he drift into those infield positions? Yes, but he doesn't look totally comfortable doing that, in my opinion. I always think back to, and I know it was really early on in the season, but I always think back to that Villa away game where we were trying to use Timber as the kind of inverted fullback. And for a long time, it just weren't working in that game. Defensively, he was okay, but just asking him to do that slightly hybrid role, it seemed like a problem for him. I think centre back is a position that he's very, very comfortable in, obviously because of his career history. But I think you're spot on when you say he's not really a centre back in stature. He's more of a fullback in stature. But when I watch Jurrien Timber at right back, I see a complete player. I see someone that can win those 1v1 duels, that gives little change to the winger, whoever that might be on the occasion, but also contributes massively to what Arsenal are and what they can do going forward. I do wonder, though, Mike, looking at Timber and what he can contribute going forward right now, which has been a real feature of his game in recent weeks, especially in the last two games, is that because the Odegaard and Saka thing's back and that's clicking really well? Would Ben White be contributing as much going forward right now if he were in the team, just because our right side is so good and so functional?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think we need to sort of like caveat a lot of this and just say that we did an episode about Ben White previously, and I think we both said it looks like he's not particularly fit. So, you know, when we're talking about numbers and stuff, there's obvious like reasons behind that. But I don't think we can discount sort of what the role that Ben White's played in getting that right side so sort of fluid and having the impetus that it does have. But then I think there's definitely ways that you can evolve a team, and I think we're looking at this blend, right, aren't we? We've spoken about this blend and how we get to a point where we've not sacrificed technical skills in favor of physical skills. And I don't feel like we've got that blend right across the team this season. But in Timber, I kind of do see a player who blends both of those worlds really nicely, because he's got the on-ball skills and he's got the dribbling and pace, but he's also got that physicality as well. Is he as good defensively as Ben White? I don't think so. But I think he offers you a nice option. And in terms of going forward, I want to see a bit more from Timber. I think, and maybe this is a sort of a tactical thing. And he's told, you know, not to overlap as much as maybe Ben White would have done a few years ago when we think about him being at his best going forward. And maybe it's more of a safety first thing from Arteta telling him not to do that. But I would say in recent games when we've looked a bit more balanced and Odegaard's come back into the team, you know, Timber's been getting involved in the attacking third quite a lot. He obviously had that disallowed goal at the weekend, and got an assist the other night as well. So I think we're seeing him moving in the right direction, and I think with that right hand side, right back berth being his now, he can really make it his own. Because I don't think it helps when he's moving from left to right, because there's obviously, as you say, different things that he's being asked to do.
Yeah, there's different things that he's being asked to do in terms of the team, and obviously there's that natural comfort that you feel, right, when you're playing on your correct side, and especially when you're a defender, I think it's even more important than when you're playing in an attacking position. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, we're in a space now where we're looking at Jurrien Timber and we're thinking, this is your position for now. Ben White's going to be out for a significant amount of time. You can make this your own, and it's down to you whether or not Ben White gets back in the team. I think it's very hard to judge Ben White on what we've seen from him this season, because we know, and we suspected, but we know for sure now that he's been carrying a problem, and that has definitely impacted his performances and fitness levels and all the rest of it. So perhaps some of our appraisals of Ben White earlier in the season, when we were saying he's not quite at it, were unfair, and that has to be factored in this debate. But I guess I'll round off this section by throwing this question out there, and we'll both give an answer to this. UEFA Champions League final, both are fit. Who plays at right back for you, Ben White or Jurrien Timber?
It's a really tough one. I mean, this is a stupid follow-up question, but who are we playing?
Okay, Real Madrid, if they even get through the league phase.
Playing Real Madrid, I'm playing Ben White personally. If he's fit, I think if they're both at sort of peak fitness levels, I'm playing Ben White, just because I think he's played in big games for us and he's reliable. I mean, something that obviously doesn't show up in data or anything, but shithousery, I think, is a big part of his game. And I think it's, that I don't think it can be underestimated how street smart Arsenal have become. And I think, we used to get accused of being soft in the past. I don't think you can say that about this team anymore, because they, tactical fouls, time wasting. David Raya got booked for it the other day. Ben White, his role earlier in the season of sort of, or last season even, winding up opposition defenders and whatnot. I think like those little marginal gains are important. And in those, really tight matches where you're playing the likes of, elite teams like Real Madrid, obviously we're living in dreamland here and talking about the Champions League final, but things like that can make the difference. But overall, I would say like reliability, defensive stability, I would go with him, I think. And just because of that network that he's built up with Odegaard and Saka. But that's not to say that, given Timber, if he starts the next 10 games, he might start pushing to that level that Ben White's reached in the past. So tough one.
Yeah, I think right now I still give Ben White the edge, despite the fact that he's not quite been at it this season, because we've explained the reasons for that. I think with Jurrien Timber, he's got an opportunity to make me change my mind in the next kind of 12 weeks or whatever it's going to be that Ben White's missing for. He's got an opportunity, but as of today, at the time of recording this, on the 28th of November, 2024, if it were the biggest of games, it would be Ben White for me. Just. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. And this one's with regards to a summer signing, Riccardo Calafiori. Does Riccardo Calafiori convince you defensively? I've got a fairly strong, probably unpopular opinion on this. Are you convinced by the Italian when it comes to the defensive side of the game?
I mean, I think it's, again, another tough question. These questions are hard, man. Because we're talking about like quite a small sample size. I think obviously like Timber spent the whole of last season out, so we don't have that sort of back catalogue of references like we do with Ben White, of performances to draw upon. And I know you do watch Serie A, but I don't know how much Calafiori you watched previously. So obviously that whether you've seen him or what you thought of him will probably inform your judgment of him as a player now. So I don't have that reference point, but just judging off what I've seen, I think definitely he's been brought in to be a bit more of a facilitator. So I'm thinking of like similar to Josko Gvardiol's role at Man City, and he's pushing up higher, and he's going to be involved more in the build up. And I think we're not quite seeing that aspect of him yet, or he's not like flourishing in that regard. I think he can improve definitely, but again, as we said, with a lot of new signings with Arteta, it's a complicated set of instructions that they're asked to do. It's a difficult system to play in, and it's highly competitive now. But I would say that I would maybe expected more from him in terms of like duels, aerially as well, given his stature and profile. Like we're talking about Timber, and he's pretty much the opposite when it comes to sort of fullbacks, I would say, profile wise. So yeah, I mean, it was really interesting because I had a quick look on FBref before we did this, when we jumped on for this, and versus centre backs, his defensive numbers are decent but not great. But versus fullbacks, which is what he is, his defensive numbers are really good, because obviously you're comparing it to I guess what a lot of teams have, a more traditional fullbacks who are more attacking, I guess, rather than a centre back playing fullback. So that's quite an interesting comparison, I guess the question really comes down to what do you want out of him? And I'm not really sure we are seeing what Arteta wants out of him just yet, personally.
I am going to start off by saying I'm not convinced by him defensively at the moment, but I don't think it's due to a lack of ability. Like, I don't think it's because he can't defend. I don't think it's because he hasn't got the physical attributes, the understanding of the game or anything like that. I think it's because he doesn't want to defend. Like, and I think back to his time in Italy where, he was lauded as this really progressive young defender. And that was unusual and unheard of. That is not your typical Italian centre half. And that's why he captured so many headlines and became such a big point of interest, because he played the game in a completely different way. And at times, if I'm going to be, completely honest, a lot of the criticism that he faced was because he made silly decisions. And by silly decisions, I mean decisions that were too bold for the time, and gave the ball away stupidly, needlessly, got caught out high up the pitch. And I think for me, I kind of went into this, Calafiori signing with all of that in mind, but thinking that Mikel Arteta would be able to put him on the straight and narrow and mold him into what he wants him to be. I thought he was coming in to be a kind of hybrid between what we have in sort of Tomiyasu and Timber when they play left back and what we have in Zinchenko. The other two, the first two I mentioned, are really good, solid defenders. 1v1, you put them up against anyone, you'd back them. But when it comes to being more progressive and getting forward, I don't think any of them really have what it takes when they're playing from the left, especially. And I think Calafiori offers a bit of both. Like, he can be that guy that tucks in and becomes an additional centre-back and defends well, but he can also go forward. And I think it's on Mikel Arteta to just... Look, you don't want to clip his wings, because players like that, what's special about them is that they are bold, is that they are brave, and is that they essentially don't give a shit a lot of the time, and they'll just go and do what they think is the right thing to do. I remember covering the PSG game earlier in the season, and he was playing as a 10 at points. And I asked Mikel Arteta after the game in the press conference, was that an instruction? And he goes, no. He goes, that's what he wanted to do. He was just drifting into those positions.
Yeah.
So I think you don't want to clip his wings, but I think it's on Mikel Arteta, especially in the bigger games, to just curb that enthusiasm a little bit that Calafiori has, because it can get him in trouble. And I'm not going to write the guy off. And I think, he can improve. I thought a lot of the same stuff about Gabriel when he first came in. A little bit rash, a little bit reckless at times, but clearly has the ability and the capability. And I feel like that with Calafiori. I think he will come good. But right now, I got to be honest, there was a couple of moments against Sporting, I thought, where he looked a little bit suspect defensively, and that had me worried. So my answer is to, does Calafiori convince you defensively? Right now is no. Where would you like to end this segment? Is it a no? Is it a yes? Is there caveats to it? I'll let you have the final word.
Yeah, I'm gonna avoid it and just say TBC, because I think I've not seen enough from him to properly judge. Just looking at sort of how much he's played. He's played 7 games in the Champions. Sorry, 7 games in the Premier League, 4 games in the Champions League. But obviously not all of them starts. I think that's quite a tough sort of, as I said, back catalogue to judge from. And also we've not been good in a lot of the games this season, or we've been down to 10 men. So I think there's a lot of caveats when it comes to judging these sorts of performances. You always want a player to settle into a team when it is a settled team already, and the key players are playing and we're moving in the right direction. So I think we're going to start seeing that now, and I'm sure we'll touch on Odegaard soon, but for me, like, this team ticks when Odegaard's in it, and the switch of system when he was out just led us to really becoming something that we're not really, and something that really shocked quite a lot of us to see. So I think with Odegaard back in the team and us looking a lot more balanced, I think players like Calafiori can really start to show his worth and clock into that system. Because you're talking about him, turning up at 10 against PSG. Well, why is that? Like, is that to cover for a deficiency elsewhere? Is that what Arteta wants him to do eventually? Like, he said no in that instance, but is he going to be that sort of player who does pop up and make sort of runs into the box? Because I think the thing about attacking fullbacks is that they often aren't marked a lot of the time, or it's going to be by a winger. So it's often a place where you can find someone unmarked. So yeah, there's a lot of question marks for me. And yeah, as I said, I'm gonna duck it and say TBC for now.
You should join a political party, mate, the way you're ducking these questions. Anyway, let's move on to number 3, and I'll let you have the first word on this one. Can we win the Premier League without signing a striker in January?
I think if Martin Odegaard stays fit, I would say we can. If he doesn't, and we drop off again, and we don't find a solution to the clear problems that we had when he was out of the squad, I would say no, and we probably would need to bring in, maybe if it's not a number 9, maybe if it's another forward, or even like an attacking number 10. I would say, because yeah, as I just said, look, like when he's fit and firing, he's obviously unbelievable in all aspects, in terms of on the ball, in terms of leading the press, in terms of organization. Like, even, you know, they've pointed it out on Match of the Day and stuff. Like, he's the one pointing at other players to tell them who to press and where to press. I mean, you don't get that without him on the pitch, and it's such an important part of how we play, you know, squeezing teams and pushing up. So I would say if Odegaard, you know, remains in this current form and is fully fit, I think we can definitely do it. And I think, you know, I'm sure you've spoken about this, but I think City's form has come as a massive shock. And to me, I wasn't expecting it. I know obviously there was the chat last season about, after them winning the treble, are they going to drop off? What else have they got to win? But for me, my mind has always gone to, well, Pep Guardiola is the best manager in the world and the best manager of a generation. If he can't, you know, motivate his team, who can really? But you know, we're seeing the evidence now of that team dropping off, I think, and I don't really think this is going to be a blip. I don't really think, you know, it's a couple of games and they'll be back at their best. I'm seeing things that are quite concerning, to be honest, from a City perspective. So I think the opportunity is really there. I mean, obviously it's going to be really intriguing to see how it plays out on Sunday against Liverpool, because I think if Liverpool win that, you know, they'll go 11 points ahead of City and 12 points ahead of us, I think. That's a huge gap to make up for. So as much as it is about us doing the best we can and us going on a massive run now, I think obviously what happens in that Liverpool game, but beyond with Liverpool in general, is going to be really key to that.
Yeah, I think the title race is an interesting one. I don't really know where it's going to go. I don't really know how it's going to look. I'm not really paying too much attention to it at the moment until after Christmas. My viewpoint is that we need to focus on getting ourselves back on track. We need to go and win our games, do our job, and let's see if we've made up 3 or 4 points on Liverpool by the time Christmas comes, then we're right back in it as far as I'm concerned, you know. So we got a lot of the hard away games out the way. They've still got a lot of them to come. You know, you hope that things will level out a little bit in terms of the fixtures and the results that come with those, etc. I think I kind of agree with you where you say that if Odegaard is fit, and I guess, you know, you can put Saka in that bracket, if some of those key players stay fit, Kai Havertz, etc., if they stay fit, then there's no reason why we can't win the Premier League without signing a striker. But I do think we could really do with another attacker. And that could be a wide player. That could be a creative influence that plays in an advanced role from the midfield. We just need someone else who can help carry the burden of goals and assists. And I don't mind if it's in the shape of another 10 or, you know, an 11 or a 7 or whatever. I haven't got a problem with that. But I do think we need just a little bit more firepower. And the reason I say that, Mike, is not because I don't believe in the players that we got. And it's not because I don't think that Kai Havertz can score enough goals, or Saka or Martinelli or Odegaard. It's because I just worry so much right now about Gabriel Jesus. You know, had he been playing well right now, I don't think this would even be a debate. Like, I genuinely don't. I think if he was playing well now and scoring and firing on all cylinders, and I'm not talking about scoring a goal a game or a goal every other game, because we know that Gabriel Jesus has never been that guy. But he's contributing nothing in front of goal right now. And that is, in my opinion, increasing our need to go out and bring in another attacking force. And if he can get his form right, then the answer to this question of can we win the Premier League without signing a striker, it changes for me. But as of now, I think we do need an attacking reinforcement. It doesn't have to be a number 9 in my eyes, but we do need one more. Is kind of what I would say on this.
I was going to ask you actually, what did you think of Jesus' performance at the weekend in the game against Forest? Because I was watching it extremely high up in the stadium. I got tickets literally one row from the back of upper tier, which meant that I could stand up because there was no one behind me, which is it was just quite weird. But obviously, yeah, I was quite far away, so I couldn't see like all the close up details. But I thought he had a better game. I don't know if he was fantastic, if I'd describe it as that, but I thought what he offered was something that maybe Havertz hasn't got, which is the sort of tight control and touches and the ability to drift around and link up play and a little bit better than Havertz can. I think Havertz is, he's bigger, he's a bit more cumbersome. I would say better aerially, obviously, and better in other areas and goal scoring crucially. But I thought Jesus kind of did play well. Whether that is enough, I don't think so. I think we need more from him, but I would say it's an encouraging performance. And to be fair, like our expectations of him are on the floor at the moment. So anything he does, we're going to be like, oh, okay, that was slightly better. So again, the floor is low, but I thought in terms of like positional rotations, in terms of bringing other players into play, especially Saka, and Odegaard and Marino later on as well. I thought he was slightly better, but again, yeah, this is small things, but I'm trying to look at him potentially being the person that can take minutes off Havertz, and in that game, I think it worked.
Well, the good thing is that we went and we won convincingly, and we didn't have to bring Kai Havertz on. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that in itself shows some value to Gabriel Jesus. The fact that we turn up, we beat a team that a lot of teams, by the way, or a lot of people, I should say, felt that were going to cause us major trouble, myself included. I thought Forest were going to give us a torrid time. I thought that we'd beat them, but I thought it would be a real slog and a hard one. And in the end, it wasn't that. It was a really good performance, our best performance of the season, I would argue. Even though we've been to City, even though we've been to Spurs and we got results from those places, even though we won at Villa, it felt like our best performance of the season because there was a lot more cohesion about it. And Gabby Jesus certainly played a part in that. I won't take that away from him. He did. But I just think at this level, the level that we're operating at now, he needs to contribute in front of goal as well. And it's all good, when he was playing sort of in that position and drifting left and drifting right and bringing others into the game. When the team was scoring and scoring really freely, it wasn't that much of an issue. Instead, you could focus on the positive play. But because that sort of all-round game is showing signs of returning like it did at the weekend, it's still not quite there. It's not there enough for me to excuse him from scoring goals or contributing in front of goal. So it's kind of where I'm at on him at the minute. But can we win the Premier League without signing a striker in January? I think we can, but I'd love an attacking reinforcement. I think it's really, really important if we can get something done that we do. Okay, Gabriel or Saliba, who is more important to this Arsenal team?
You know what? Before you added that last bit, I had an answer, because I thought it was more like, who do you prefer?
All right, go with who do you prefer? Go on.
Okay,
I think I know who you're going to say.
Yeah, I prefer Saliba. I think it kind of depends what you like from your defender, I guess, because they are very different, aren't they? I mean, I like a sort of Rolls Royce defender. I just think they're more aesthetically pleasing, whereas some people like your defender to sort of kick lumps out of the opponent and be like a bit like a battering ram. But yeah, I like Saliba because I think he's got unique qualities. I think he's as I say, he's smooth. He's a really excellent sweeper, and if anything goes in behind, he sweeps it up. Like we saw the other day against Victor Gyökeres. I thought he was really good, and this is one of the most informed strikers on the planet right now. And I thought both him and Gabriel handled him very well. But in those moments when the ball was knocked in behind, when Sporting finally decided to stop passing it around the back and they actually played it to him, I thought his ability to sweep up and keep him quiet was excellent. And like I said, man, he's got the fresh trim back now, so he's back at his best. He's back at his best. But yeah, in terms of who I like and who I enjoy watching, Saliba. Out of who's more important, I think that's a trickier question.
I think out of who's more, when it comes to who's more important, I think the answer is obvious. I think it's Gabriel. Like, I see him as one of the leaders of the team. It's a bit more senior than William Saliba, a bit more vocal than William Saliba. I think the thing that has gone under the radar for the best part of 2 or 3 seasons now is that Gabriel spends a hell of a lot of his time defending his area, but also going and cleaning up for whichever left back we've decided to push into midfield or up the left-hand side of the pitch. And I think the reason he's so important is because I don't think there are many defenders in world football that can defend as a centre-back to that standard and provide as much cover to the fullback as he does. And I think that's because of his athleticism, his ability to get across the ground, his just general defensive instincts. I love that he's a warrior, a fighter. And I agree with you that Saliba is the more aesthetically pleasing one. Like, he's the guy that you would pick out if you were watching Arsenal for the first time as the kind of Rolls Royce, as you say. But I just think in terms of importance to the team, because of his seniority, because of what he gives us from set pieces when we go forward, man.
Yeah.
I think he's slightly more important than William Saliba right now. And that's not me shitting on William Saliba, who I think is amazing, but it's me kind of wanting to make the case that actually all we do is sit and talk about how good Saliba is. And he is, but Saliba's maybe not quite as important to the overall unit as Gabriel Magalhaes. So I'm going to go Gabriel on the more important question.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, I'll probably agree with you on the more important thing. And look, I think it's situational as well. And I think the way that we've played this season has influenced that, who's more important. Because I think when in previous seasons, when we've been pushing higher and there's more space left in behind, I think Saliba is obviously the better player there in that situation. But when we're bunkered in, when we're having to fight, scrap, Gabriel's obviously the man for that situation, isn't it? And thank God he chose us, because I remember when I was working, when we signed him, I think he was sort of deciding between us and Man United. So it could have been a very different, and I think he was a decent price as well, wasn't he? I don't think we paid too much for him. So if you look at, and also the key thing is here, they make each other better, don't they? I think centre backs is all about the partnership, so I think they complement each other really, really well. And I think if you were to take one out and put another defender next to him, you would probably say you'd feel more comfortable replacing Saliba rather than Saliba being next to another defender, I would say. So yeah, on the balance of things, I'll probably agree with you.
We paid less than £25 million for Gabriel. And now I would say that he's worth 75 million.
At least.
He's 26 years old as well. Still got plenty of gas left in the tank for sure. Okay, let's move on to the final question then. Has Declan Rice regressed this season? Now, this is something that I've seen written quite a bit on the social media platforms. We've talked on the show before about Declan Rice not necessarily being at his best. I think the Euros, the hangover of that, spilled over into this season, and that's caused him problems. And then you add to the fact that, he's picked up that toe injury and he's been missing and then half fit in other games. Would you say overall this season he's regressed a little bit? Have you been disappointed that he hasn't kicked on or at least maintained the level that he showed for most of last season?
I've been a bit disappointed, yeah, because I think, as I mentioned with Calafiori, we've got the back catalogue to see how important he's been for us. And, he's been a real leader on the pitch and off, I think. And he, came into the club at a really important time, obviously, a marquee signing. So I think definitely he's been disappointing. But again, with all of these things, I think there's a lot of context to it. I think he's played a lot of football. He was, incredibly important to us last season. And probably he's just one of these players that just needed a bit of a rest. And England in the summer didn't go well, as you mentioned. I think all of these factors have just contributed to him not being quite at his best. And then the position dilemma, I guess, is tricky, because we've looked better when Thomas Partey's played at number 6. And then when Rice has played at 8, he's not been that impressive this season. So I think it's in, you know, across multiple facets of he has been a bit disappointing. But, you know, that's not to say that he's not going to come back into it and he's not going to be a really important player for us. And again, to touch on another point we mentioned earlier, how many times have we been able to field our, you know, our best 11 or our best midfield? Like the composition's been off, the balance of the team has been off. So I think when we get back to that, we can start to see the best of him. But I will say, to be honest, and I'm not sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, him not starting against Forest is quite strange, I think. You know, is there an injury going on? I don't know. Maybe Arteta's spoken about that, but that's surprising to me because I feel like, you know, when he's fit, he starts every game. So let's see if that trend continues.
I think that was Mikel Arteta just trying to protect him a little bit because, you know, he had that toe problem. He played against Chelsea, but he didn't really look right and he had to go off around about the hour mark. And Mikel Arteta said that he was struggling. He missed international duty. He comes back. And I think it was twofold, that decision. I think it was partly he's not at 100%. He's fit enough to make the bench, but I'm not going to start him. I'm not going to risk him because we've got a really important run to come. And I appreciate his significance. But at the same time, I do think Mikel Arteta felt that the team needed a refresh. You know, you look at who started in the Forest game. It took us all by surprise, caught us all off guard. And so I think it was a twofold decision. I don't think it was as simple as he's not fit, so I'm not going to play him. I agree with you that there might have been a little bit more to that. And it did strike me as a little bit strange because you think if Rice is fit enough for the bench, then he's fit enough to start the game. And hey, if he's only got 60 minutes in the tank, then you'd prefer to start with him rather than bring him on, right? But I think Mikel Arteta is struggling with this positional dilemma that you mentioned. What is he? Is he a 6? Is he an 8? Where does he do his best work? I think that Mikel Arteta probably had a view going into this season on who should be the 6 moving forward. And Thomas Partey's form has just completely changed that and caused him a good dilemma, but it's a dilemma all the same. Like, so yeah, it's a difficult one, but I would say, like you, I've been a little bit disappointed with Declan Rice this season. Again, I appreciate there's context and there's factors that have impacted his ability to perform, but I just feel like he's not quite at the level that we've seen over the past couple of seasons, and you know, over last season and sort of the beginning of this season. It's just not the same, and I do worry about that. And I worry that the longer this debate goes on and this uncertainty carries on about what his role actually looks like, the harder he's going to find it to kind of find that rhythm again and get back on track and be the player that we know he can be, the player that we were watching throughout last season, the player that essentially we paid £105 million for, which is a hell of a lot of money. Look, I left this question to the end on purpose because myself and Mike are going to jump over to the Patreon side of things to discuss Arsenal's midfield. What is the best midfield trio right now? I'm sure we'll cover off the Rice debate in a little bit more detail. We're also going to talk Partey's form. Mikel Merino, has he started to turn around the opinion of him? How important is Martin Odegaard? We've got all of that to come on the Patreon side of things. So now would be a good time to plug once again that you can jump over to our Patreon page. You can visit patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna, or you can search for the podcast on the Patreon app, website, whatever, and you can sign up for just £3 a month. That's less than the price of coffee in some of those swanky cafes that we like to go to here in London, especially. So do check it out. There's more content, more to get your tea stuck into, and of course, you'd be supporting us. For now, as far as the main pod goes, Mike, thank you very, very much, as always. And we'll see you guys, hopefully, over on the Patreon side in just a moment.